Well, hi there, everybody. Gary Neville Podcast. Breathless situation at Stamford Bridge. Game that seemed to be drifting towards a goalless draw, and suddenly we're talking about a 1-1 draw. Pick the bones out of it, Gary, for us.
Start from the beginning?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, look, for 35 minutes, it became pretty obvious after about 5 minutes that Manchester United's midfield were absolutely dominating Chelsea's. That two in there that Chelsea had were really struggling, Jorginho and Loftus-Cheek, and that was the sort of real fundamental part of the game. And when you've got a game by the scruff of the neck in possession like United did, they needed them to go and get that goal. They didn't do that. And I've got to give some credit to Graham Potter. We always say that managers, sometimes it's harsh making substitutions after half an hour, 35 minutes. He took Cucurella off, and he needed to do that. I said in the first half, both systems were screaming against one another, but Manchester United were their system was by far dominating Chelsea's. Casemiro was getting on the ball, Eriksen and Fernandes were in pockets, and I thought Eriksen and Fernandes, with more quality at the top of the games, should have done better in that period of the game. They'll never get a more simple game at Stamford Bridge than they did in that first part. Chelsea just couldn't get near them. But then the game turned that 10 minutes before half-time. Even though United had the best chance, when Anthony had that sort of shot in the right channel, Aubameyang started to get in the game a little bit. Chelsea started to get a bit of I suppose in some ways they were able to lock on to United's midfield players. Kovacic, obviously the introduction, flat in midfield alongside Jorginho and Loftus-Cheek. Mount coming into that position to take up Casemiro, and then they had the split strikers. So from that moment, they regained a bit of control, Chelsea. But it was a real struggle. To the point in the second half, I thought Chelsea were better, and they certainly had to be better than they were in the first half. But it was quite negative in some ways, the game, in the sense that it was both managers took off their most attacking players. I thought Manchester United's attacking play completely stopped from the moment that Jadon Sancho went off and Fernandes went on to the left. It then just became a game of sitting back in the shape and hoping something would happen from that point. So,
but above all, don't lose.
Yeah, there was a don't lose attitude in the game. I know we've criticised managers here down the years for Manchester United and Chelsea, say Jose Mourinho or Antonio Conte, where they played sort of what would be made negative substitutions in a game to try and win it. And the game got more ugly, more broken, more of a struggle. It was like two boxers grappling and sort of like never really releasing, and the referee always having to step in to break them up. That's how the game felt. Not really a lot of quality on show, and we've usually seen quite a bit of quality in these games in the last few months, but this last week it's not been as much. The Liverpool City game was a little bit attritional as well, like you said. So maybe there's a turn in the Premier League that's happening this last couple of weeks. You've mentioned all the games, the potential fatigue, the World Cup coming up.
Yeah.
It is a
and
strange
leading
time.
to lack of goals, really. Yeah.
A lack of goals in this last week or so. And today, managers certainly taking a backward step. Two very positive managers who usually are on the front foot. They didn't really want to lose that game. They've both got their wish in the end, but I'm not quite sure that that's how they designed it.
No, well, let's go on to the incidents that really mattered. In the end, we talked about a set piece, finding a way through. It wasn't the way we were imagining it. It led to the penalty.
Yes, we thought it could be a set piece, a mistake, and it happened that way. Scott McTominay, like you say, I think we've talked about this on television, me and Jamie Carragher, for years, about how to block players running in the box. The minute that someone gets in front of you, you've almost got to let them go. You can block them a little bit with one arm to try and stop them get across you, but the second that you put that second arm around, just visually to the crowd, to us, to the referee, we're straight away thinking he's in trouble, just because of the actual optics of how it looks. Whereas if you've got one arm, it just looks like you're sort of trying to protect your space. And as soon as he got in front of him, Brozier, he should have just let him go, Scott McTominay. The penalty's given, and then you think it's Chelsea's game. And it was about two fouls, actually, this game. The one by McTominay and the one by Jorginho down here that tripped up, I think it was Elanga. And I thought to myself, Manchester United didn't have enough attacking players on the pitch. So you ended up with McTominay as a centre-forward with Elanga and, I think who else was on the pitch? Anthony. And all Chelsea really had to do was try and manage the game and control the game. Not giving free kicks away was a big part of that, because that allowed Manchester United to get bodies in the box. And that's what happened. It came from a second phase, from sort of Manchester United having bodies up the pitch.
And an overload at the far post.
And an overload. Yeah. You know, it could have been McTominay that actually scored the goal. But it was a brilliant header from Casemiro. We may have been sat here saying, what's he done getting in front of McTominay?
Yeah.
He should have let McTominay have the header. But now he's sort of leaning this way off balance. The ball seems to be a little bit he's stretching for it. And how he gets the power on it to get it across Kepa into that far corner.
And even then, there was drama before it crossed the line.
Yeah, he gets a good touch to it. And I thought, actually, as the ball went in and he puts it down on the line where we stopped it on that initial look, that's not over the line. But what happens is that Kepa brings the ball back. It's obviously gone behind the line whilst it's in midair, and he brings the ball back with his arms. So he brings the ball back onto the line, and it looks to us like, oh, it's not gone over. But that's where one of the great introductions of technology into the game. We talk about VAR a lot in a negative sense, but goal line technology, it's absolutely cut and dried. It's either in or it's out, and they get it right every single time. And you think about that, I'm not sure that goal would have been given today if we didn't have goal line technology.
And for Manchester United, it's put, at least for a moment, the Cristiano Ronaldo story to bed, hasn't it? They've managed to get a result here. Yeah, he probably would have got some game time today. I mean, do you want to go over that and just...
Yeah.
I think it's been the big talking point around this fixture. Not after the fixture, but certainly in the build-up. There was nothing else asked of Erik ten Hag in the press conference yesterday.
And there won't be moving forward. He's probably going to get asked about it now. Saying that, your team was struggling. You ended up with McTominay up front, with Fernandes up front. Is Cristiano Ronaldo going to come back in? They're not scoring as many goals as maybe they should do. I mean, the first thing I would say is I think with the game against Newcastle on a Sunday, who are doing pretty well, Tottenham on the Wednesday, and then Chelsea on the Saturday, 5 points is not the worst tally in the world from those 3 games. Yeah, they'll be disappointed not doing better against Newcastle last week, but having drawn against Newcastle, I think 4 points from the 2 games is a pretty good result for Manchester United this week. In terms of Cristiano Ronaldo, look, he's asked for a transfer on the eve of the season. He's obviously not then gone on the pre-season tour. He has shook his head at times when he's been substituted or whilst he's been on the bench. He's left the ground twice before the team have finished and got in his car and gone home. So he's building a pretty long list of ill discipline at the club, and that's not Cristiano Ronaldo. I played with this lad for many, many years. This is one of the greatest professionals, and this is one of the greatest players. But I think he's finding it difficult to come to terms with not being the star at the end of his career, and the fact that he's playing, obviously, less minutes than he wants to do. And you have 2 ways of approaching it. I played with great players, some of whom couldn't end their career at Manchester United because they couldn't handle not being in the team every week. And I played with exceptional and great players who said that actually it's natural. You come in at the very beginning of the career and it's like a mountain. And you go up and you get some minutes, then you come out the team, then you go back in, then you come back out, and then you go back in, and then you become actually a regular, and you get to the top of the mountain, you stay there for a bit, but then you come down the other side and you start to come out of the team. And it happens with all of us. And I'm not a great player, but it happened with me at Manchester United. And it's very difficult at the last 3-4 years for me. I was playing 25, 30 games a season. It happened with Paul Scholes. It happened with Ryan Giggs, where they're not certain starters every single week. And you either accept it that way or you accept it a different way, which is, no, I've still got to play and I've got to leave because I must play every single week. And it seems to me that Cristiano Ronaldo has adopted that second approach, which is, I'm not going to accept playing at a bigger club, less. I'm going to need to probably go and play somewhere else more. And I think that's what he's got to do now. I think the club and him have got to be mature about this and accept that it's not good for Cristiano, it's not good for the club, it's not good for the dressing room. And the thing I always say is this thing seems to be a Cristiano Ronaldo or Erik ten Hag thing. I always think of it from a point of view, if you're a player and you're Cristiano Ronaldo, how do you look to the rest of your teammates? There are hundreds of players who've sat on the bench for many years watching Cristiano Ronaldo and been happy for him when he's been the star. And I always think if you think that you should come on and that you think that you shouldn't, you should be on the pitch and someone else shouldn't, you're almost saying to your teammate, you get off, I'll go on. I know that's the way in which great players and winners and people with that mentality think, but there's also a spirit and an energy in the dressing room which is really important, that you respect each other. And when someone else is playing, you might be disappointed, and you should be disappointed, but you say to your mate, go on, get out there today and do well. And at the end of the game, when he comes off, you're in that dressing room, you say, great result, lads, well done. You bite your bottom lip, you get in the shower, we've all been there, you get in your car and you get home as quickly as you can, and you have your Chinese takeaway or whatever it is you have that night. And that's what I used to do. The moments in my career where you think, right, Raphael's gone in, John O'Shea's gone in, Wes Brown's gone in. I watched Wes Brown play a full season and win a Champions League, and he's a great lad, brilliant player, and I was delighted for him. Of course I wanted to be in the team. Of course I wanted to be out there and be captain, but I wasn't. I'd been injured. I wasn't at my best. I wasn't sharp enough. And then Raphael came into training. It was Raphael who actually finished my career mentally in some ways, because I actually used to watch him in training get close to players and to, snap into tackles and then get up and get back out again. And I couldn't get my legs forward. And I thought, I get it. I see it. And Manchester United this season, is there any Manchester United fan who isn't a Cristiano Ronaldo, what would be, if you like, so biased towards him? We score more goals and win more points when he's not in the team. And we look a better team when he's not in the team. And that's just a fact. I don't think any Manchester United fan who's looking at the game would think that he should start at the moment. I don't quite get this idea that Erik ten Hag is disrespecting him. I really don't. I think Erik ten Hag has, to be fair, been left with no choice this week other than...
Disrespect's come from Cristiano.
He has. He's been left with no choice this week. He either looks weak with his players, the rest of his players and the fans and the media, Erik ten Hag, by letting a player leave before the end of the game twice, or he fines him and he makes him and suspends him for a match. He's left him with no choice. Cristiano will understand that one day. When he's older, he may be a coach, he might be a boss of a business, he might be in a position of leadership whereby you can't demonstrate weakness if someone's ill-disciplined, no matter who that person is. I don't think Erik ten Hag will have wanted Cristiano Ronaldo to walk down the touchline and leave in his car away from the stadium. He would have wanted at the end of the game Cristiano Ronaldo to come on the pitch, hug Erik ten Hag, hug the players, bite his bottom lip, get into that changing room, get changed and go home. And maybe then the next day come in and see Erik ten Hag and say, I think you were out of order last night, not bringing me on or not bringing me on quicker or whatever it might have been. Have that out of sight. I heard Roy talking before, and I get the point around that. Roy's got a similar mentality as Cristiano Ronaldo, this fierce mentality. I don't think that way. I can't think that way. I've always been somebody who's always thought that the team comes first. But I've played with players who've got this. You can't describe this winning mentality that they have. It's beyond something that the normal folk have. That we have. We all want to win, but they need to win. We all want to play. They need to play. There's a big difference. And that's the mentality that these sort of great stars have. And Cristiano Ronaldo's going to have to decide how this last few years of his career is going to go and how it's going to play out. There's a fine line between a winner and a whiner. And at the moment, he might just be turning the Manchester United fans into thinking he's whining a little bit and he's sulking a little bit. We don't want that end for him. He's too good. He's the greatest player I've ever seen. I love him to bits. But I think the best thing for him to do this week is go in and see Richard Arnold, John Murta, Erik ten Hag, call a meeting, say, look, my time's up here. Let me go. Let me get off. Let me go to the World Cup, and then let me leave in January and choose a club of my choice. And I think for the club, they should probably shake his hand and say thanks for everything that you've done for us, because he's done a great job for Manchester United, not just in his first spell, but in this second spell as well, and end it correctly, because we don't want this messy end between something so great that could be something so great, which is Cristiano Ronaldo's relationship and feeling about the club, and vice versa, the fans to him. And there's just a turn this week that Erik ten Hag's trying to establish control. He's trying to get a dressing room behind him, and he needs everyone with him. And I get that as a manager. And I get Cristiano's point as well. But there's a way to go about it. There's a way to go about it. And no one can agree. And to be fair to him, he didn't say sorry on his Instagram post, but he did say in the heat of the moment, we sometimes do things that we don't think are right. And I get that. So he has said sorry in a way. But he just needs to now end it, I think. It's just for both parties.
There's only a handful of games before the World Cup, and then back on Boxing Day, and the transfer window's open in January, so...
Maybe they can patch it up, plaster over the wound
so?
for the next 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks? No, it's 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks from today, isn't it, that Manchester United play 3 weeks tomorrow against Fulham away. It's the last game, actually, before the World Cup. Can they get to that point? Hopefully they can shake hands and maybe get to that point and say that's the moment where it ends. But if they can't, and it's going to continue to be a case of Cristiano dominating the press conferences, feeling disrespected for some reason, I think at that point then he has to do it next week and say, look, it's not for me, this. Let's see what happens. Either or, they either have to come to a truce for 3 weeks or they have to exit in the next week. One thing I'm sure about, it can't go on beyond January the 1st. He has to then, I think, leave. Obviously, he can't go and play for a club in December, but I think he'll only get back in mid-December or whenever it is that they get to it. So I just feel at this moment in time, Erik ten Hag's done absolutely nothing wrong in my view. I don't get this line about him being disrespected. I really don't. I know there are some people who I really respect enormously who think he has been, but I personally don't see that.
A couple of things. Something that happened today. Liverpool were beaten by Nottingham Forest, who are the bottom club. Liverpool having won 1-0 and 1-0.
Yeah.
Lost 1-0.
You're thinking that Liverpool are going to go on a little run up to the sort of World Cup, and then they're going to get that break and the momentum may shift after the World Cup. One thing I'm clear about, this World Cup will have an impact on the Premier League and on clubs. You're going to have players that get knocked out after 10 games, some who will come back and think, right, we've got 2 or 3 weeks rest, I can be revitalised for the rest of the season. But some that might be so disappointed, who might have made mistakes, not played well, who have lost the confidence. You'll have other players who go right to the end, who maybe have won it, who might come back absolutely thinking it's utopia, but be drained physically and mentally and not be able to play properly for the rest of the season. This is going to have an impact on players and on clubs, and we don't know what that is yet. But we can sense and smell something. That there is that feeling now.
Well, we've seen Rafa Varane today.
Yeah. There's that feeling that, Rafa Varane's reaction to his injury. Yeah, I think he'll be disappointed because he just gets a lot of injuries and he'll think, no, not again. But it looked to me like a player that was reacting to the thought in his mind that, am I going to miss the World Cup? And that tells you that they're thinking about it. They are thinking about it. I know they all tell us that I would say the same. We're not thinking about the World Cup.
You've talked to Virgil van Dijk this week, and
he said exactly the same. He said, we're not thinking about it. No player's thinking about it. But the fact that it's in your mind, it's there. It's almost like a cloud that's just there. It doesn't really have an impact upon you, but it's just there above your head. And I always think that when something's just distracting you slightly, and we're feeling that at the moment. I think that last couple of weeks, something's just not been quite right in the football. Maybe the last 10 days, and then we've got after the World Cup, which again could be a strange January. So there is a disruption to this season. It is a unique season, and there's a long way to go. I mean, today I thought the approach of both managers, whether that was a case of not wanting to take a risk, not wanting to lose. I don't know whether that's
being aware of playing midweek and coming here on a Saturday, and you normally get maybe to Sunday and get a little bit of extra recovery time.
Yeah,
it was pushed hard on them both, wasn't it? Really, after big performances in midweek, which every Premier League game is like that. And although there were changes in the game, changes in the lineups, it's still that mental exhaustion as much as physical. That here we go again, and I do think it's had a slightly negative impact on the type of football we've seen over the last couple of weeks. No disrespect to the players or any other aspect of the game, but the World Cup has been planted there, and we're all having to live with it.
Yeah, and I suspect it'll be like this if we ever have the World Cup again. I'm sure we will in the Middle East, because you can't play in the Middle East in June and July. So I think there'll be an element of this happening every 24 years. But there's no doubt there is a consequence. And we're seeing that, I think, at this moment in time. I don't know whether today's, I'll call it retreat from both managers during the game, which felt like a retreat, taking Aubameyang and Sterling off and Rashford and Sancho, was because of the fact that the positions that they're in, the fact that they're not as maybe, they're trying to establish themselves both at the clubs, and that's difficult at Manchester United and Chelsea, or whether they were just thinking that actually my players just feel a little bit, they look a little bit spent. They look like they need...
Well, Sterling and Aubameyang were only substitutes at Brentford, so there was no sort of exhaustion, whereas the other two did start for Manchester United, didn't they? So
they did. So, look, there's no doubt that game, it deserved to be a draw in some ways, even we thought that Chelsea were going to win it in the end. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, there are games tomorrow. There are more games in the next few weeks. There's a lot of big games. There's plenty of points to be played for. And I think, like you say, Manchester United and Chelsea at the end of that game, both managers tonight might just get home and say, it could have been worse. Erik ten Hag having been 1-0 down with 4 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go. And Graham Potter could have been thinking, hang on a minute, we could have been out of sight in the first half an hour if Manchester United had been a bit more clinical, because we just didn't quite get that one right. We got dominated. And to be fair, when a manager rips his plan up after half an hour, he's telling everybody that, to be fair, he's got it wrong and that he's misread it. But well done to him for changing. I think that was a big moment for him, because I think he didn't wait till half-time. I don't think he'd have got to half-time. I think United would have scored in that 10 minutes.
Talking of out of sight, for the moment at least, Steven Gerrard, who we did talk about in the last podcast, but the axe has fallen. And have you seen anything in the way people have spoken about it after he's left, about the problems that he had, or whether he didn't have a good enough relationship with the players, or were the club too premature in getting rid of him? How did you see it when it happened? Did you expect it to happen?
I think, to be fair, I felt over this last few weeks that clubs were going to make changes just before the World Cup to give new managers, I think I said it on the podcast last week, that I felt this was the moment to change now, to give the new manager 2 weeks with the players before the break to then assess what needs to happen in January. So I think he was always on the edge, Steven Gerrard. It had been coming for a few weeks, the rumour mill circulating, the sort of things that you hear behind the scenes, obviously through the media, and the fans will be hearing as well. And the Villa fans, to be fair, at the end, apparently they were quite...
Negative.
Yeah, forceful on the situation. I think my advice to Steven Gerrard, and to be fair, I don't think I can give advice to any manager, but I think that it'll be tough for him because when you don't do as well as you think in a job, and this will be regarded as the word failure, I hate the word failure, because the reality of it is it's football matches and you win and you lose them. But he had an unbelievable Liverpool career, an incredible England career, a brilliant job up in Scotland, and he's now had a little bit of an obstacle put in his path. And I think for Steven Gerrard, I think the most important thing is that he gets back on the bike quickly. There are sometimes managers who sort of, if you like, lose a job, and it's a feeling that, I need to take a bit of time out. I need to go and have 6 months off. I need to reassess what I'm doing and sort of rethink it. I think with Steven Gerrard, it might be a case of, no, this is just a, I always remember, you'll remember his name, Martin, the Bayern Munich manager that won the Champions League at Wembley when we were there that time.
Was it Heinkes? No.
It might be Heinkes,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
I think he'd been sacked 3 or 4 times or something like that in his career. I think Sir Alex Ferguson was sacked earlier in his career. It's a normal thing to be sacked in your career if you're going to last 20, 30 years as a manager.
Look at Tuchel, for example.
Tuchel, sacked here. There's many great managers who've been sacked multiple times. Ranieri and all these managers who've had wonderful careers. And there are many English examples. And I think Steven Gerrard has got to see it like that. It comes with the territory. I will probably, fail again in a job. But actually, I need to get back in quickly and do what I do, which is coach football
You would
players.
recommend that to get back in?
I think I would do, because I think if Steven if he's too hard on himself, thinks too much, thinks of it as being a personal slight, thinks everybody's thinking about him and talking about him, they're not. Everybody now, I think, is mature enough to understand that when you're a young manager, you will get sacked. You will have a difficult job. You will learn from that, and he'll learn more from this than he probably will at Rangers. And he'll think about now, he'll know already what he's going to do differently next time. I'm absolutely certain. Even though I didn't take another job in management, I knew what the mistakes I made. As you're making them, you think, I should have stuck with the same system. I should have had more experience around me. I maybe should have had better Spanish-speaking coaches in my group. I should have maybe gotten rid of 1 or 2 players who I didn't think were aligned with my interests in the dressing room and thought maybe it weren't the time for them to be at the club. All these things that you know at the time, you think you can patch over them whilst you're there, and you don't. And then you think, right, next time I go in, I won't do that. And I think Steven Gerrard will know these last few months when things have started to fall away from him a little bit. Maybe the Ming situation or other situations like that. The thing between Coutinho and Buendia, which is a constant thing when you watch Villa. This almost like he was favourable towards Coutinho over Buendia. They're things that he'll think, right, okay, what do I do in the future when that type of situation arises? What do I do with a situation like the Tyrone Mings one that may develop and I make a stance? Those types of things, he'll either think, no, I got that right and I will do the same again. Or he might think, actually, no, I know exactly what I'll do next time. How you deal with the media, all the things that you assess of your sort of performance as a manager that contribute towards what you believe to be negative results. How I deal with the sporting director, how I deal with the fans, how I deal with all these things. He'll know now. I know Steven Gerrard, not brilliantly well, but I think he's honest, he's got integrity. I think he's aware. He'll assess what he's doing and what he's done well and what he's not done well. And I would say to him, not in the next 10 minutes, but try and get back in as quickly as possible and get managing and get coaching again. Because I think it's a normal thing. We should normalise the idea of managers getting sacked. It's what happens, unfortunately, now. It used to be 5-6 years, but I've had it at Salford in the last few years where I've not always got it right myself as an owner. I haven't got it right as an owner, but as a manager, those managers that have left and have been sacked have got into other jobs pretty quickly. And I always feel better. I don't know why, but I always think, right, they've got back in. Because I don't like taking people's jobs away. It's not something I like doing. No one likes doing it. So when they get back in and they're managing again, I think, right, great. They're back on the bike. They're managing again. They've got another challenge. I'll look at my mistakes that I made as an owner. I think maybe Villa can look at what they've done with Steven Gerrard and think about whether they could have done anything differently. But I think for Steven, I think get back in is the thing I would say. There might be others who disagree with that, but that's how I see it.
One footnote to that, his last game, there was a sending off of Douglas Luiz. There was 1-0 to Fulham with half an hour to go.
Yeah.
It was a yellow card upgraded by VAR to a red card, and that took all the air out of the Villa balloon, and they lost 3-0. Since then, the FA have overturned that decision, and Douglas Luiz is able to play this weekend.
I know.
And
I saw it on Sky Sports News that it had been rescinded. And I bet Steven Gerrard's looking at that thinking, too little, too late.
I think maybe the die had been cast by them, but who knows, you know, in that situation. There was even a case that Jamie Carragher came up with that Mitrovic could have been sent off and Villa could have played their 11 against Fulham's 10. But I guess when you're in that kind of situation, you feel that things go against you. But it was unfortunate for a VAR review, not a refereeing misinterpretation, if you like, but a VAR review when they're looking at the same pictures as the FA have looked at the same pictures to say that it wasn't a red card. Yeah,
it was unusual to see that rescinded. And like you say, it won't help. It's not helping Steven Gerrard now. Even the situation of that bid from Arsenal for Luiz on the last day of the transfer window, he won't have been happy about not going to Arsenal, Luiz. So he's probably got a player that's not happy in the dressing room. But coming back to the point you make, Martin, I want to look. There is a lot of negativity and negative feeling against VAR, but we're talking about actually technology today, the intervention of goal line technology, meaning that we've got a correct result. I think in most of the instances where VAR has taken place, they get it right. And that's proven by the accuracy reports that we get on.
No, I wasn't criticising VAR. I was criticising the judgment.
The judgment,
on that particular game at that crucial time for a manager.
Well, that's such an unusual one. Because VAR, you expect, with all the angles that they've got to get it right, and then for the FA to overturn it, has it happened before? I can't think where it's happened before.
Well, it hasn't happened when a manager, within 2 hours of the sending off, has been sacked.
One thing I thought was actually, and I don't know whether it's entirely true, but I've seen the reports maybe like you, that Steven Gerrard was sacked straight after the game, before actually the team bus had got back to, or he chose to get on the team bus knowing he'd been sacked. I think two things. One, I think that tells you a little bit about Steven Gerrard. We talked about Cristiano Ronaldo earlier. Steven Gerrard could easily then got himself a driver, not gone back with his team, not gone back with his staff. No, he went back with his team, he went back with his staff. Suffering, I'm sure, enormously, inside about the fact that he's just been sacked. But he did it right. I'm not quite sure as to the logic of the Villa ownership and the Villa decision makers to sack a manager knowing he's got a journey back 2 or 3 hours on a bus. I mean, let's be clear. As owners, we're all liable for criticism when we sack a manager, and I've been criticised for that. But come on, doing it immediately after a game where you know that a manager has to then travel back with his staff, with his players, I mean, that is a joke.
I don't think the staff was sacked until the next morning.
Well, they'll have known they were being sacked. You imagine that bus. I mean, the only thing you can do, to be fair, is crack a few beers open and get on it. You know what I mean? I think that's the only thing you can do. But honestly, that was the one thing that I thought was bad from Villa's point of view. I know that the fans were absolutely livid and they probably wanted immediate action, but give it 3 hours, give it 6 hours, give it whatever, you know what I mean? I think that was the thing that sort of, look, we'll hear from Villa about why they did it. Maybe one day we'll ask them. But I thought that was the one thing that sort of, on Steven Gerrard's side, I thought that he the moral high ground, I think he won there. And on the club side, I think they had to sack him. But the fact of the matter is, how you do it, when you do it, I think is important.
Sorry to finish on a negative, but thanks as always, Gary.
Thank you.